I shouldn't have opened her message. But the screen lit up, her name right there, and I just could not. We hadn't talked in months. Not since I left her daughter. Even then, my conversations with her had always been polite, surface level. Small talk over coffee, nods in passing. She was my ex's mom, after all. Nothing more. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The text came at the exact moment I was tightening the last bolt on my bike. Late afternoon, air still heavy from the earlier rain. The streets smelling faintly of wet asphalt. I'm home alone, still thinking about you. I stared at it until the letters blurred. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake, maybe meant for someone else. But her name sat there, undeniable. 5 minutes later, I was standing at her front door. It wasn't planned. My feet just moved. Her house looked the same as the last time I'd been there. White siding, ivy curling along the brick steps, a faint hum from the refrigerator through the open kitchen window. But standing there, I noticed things I hadn't before. How quiet the street felt. How the curtains in the living room swayed just slightly, like someone had been watching from inside. When the door opened, she looked different. Not in the obvious ways. Her hair still fell in that loose, unbothered way around her shoulders. But her eyes lingered on mine longer than they ever had. "You came," she said softly, almost like she was testing how it sounded. I managed a half-smile. "Your text?" A faint blush touched her cheeks. "I wasn't sure if you'd read it." I stepped inside before I could think of all the reasons I shouldn't. The house smelled like coffee and something faintly floral, maybe her perfume. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but stays in the air. She moved toward the kitchen, and I noticed the way her sweater slipped slightly off her shoulder when she reached for a mug. I sat at the counter while she poured, pretending not to notice that the silence between us wasn't casual. It was loaded. "You look tired," she said finally, glancing up at me. "Long day." My voice came out rougher than I meant. Her gaze lingered, just enough for me to feel it. "You didn't have to come." I almost laughed. "You text someone that and expect them not to?" She smiled, small but real. And for a second, I forgot she was supposed to be off limits. We talked, but not about anything that mattered. The weather, the leak in her bathroom she'd been meaning to fix. The conversation skimmed the surface, but underneath, something deeper pulled at both of us. Her fingers brushed mine when she handed me the coffee, and neither of us moved away right away. She looked down then, breaking eye contact. "You should probably go before," she trailed off. "Before what?" I asked, my voice lower now. Her eyes lifted to mine, and whatever she was about to say, she didn't. Instead, she let her hand rest on the counter, close enough that I could feel the heat from her skin. The sound of the rain starting up again filled the space. Neither of us spoke. And then, just before I stood, she said it. Quiet, careful. "Or you could stay." I didn't move right away. Her words hung there, light on the surface but heavy underneath, like they could tip everything over if I touched them wrong. She turned, sliding the coffee pot back into place. "The rain's only getting worse," she said, still not looking at me. No sense getting soaked just to ride home. It wasn't just the rain that kept me in my seat. It was her voice, steady, but with that thread of something else. Something I'd never heard from her before. She sat across from me at the counter, curling her fingers around her mug. That sweater still hung loose, and the light from the kitchen window caught in her hair in a way that made my chest tighten. "This feels—" I started, then stopped. "Feels what?" she asked, eyes flicking up to mine. "Like maybe I shouldn't be here." Her lips pressed into a small, knowing smile. "You're not doing anything wrong." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to forget that she was my ex's mom, that 3 months ago I'd been sitting across from her daughter in the same house, planning a future I clearly wasn't ready for. She took a sip of coffee. "You know, I've been meaning to ask, why did you two really break up?" I hesitated. "We wanted different things." "That's not an answer," she said softly. I set my mug down, running my thumb along the rim. I didn't feel seen, I guess. The words came out before I could pull them back. Her gaze softened. Not pitying, but like she understood exactly what I meant. "I know that feeling," she said quietly. For a moment we just sat there, the sound of the rain pressing in around us. It wasn't just the weather keeping me here now, it was the way she was looking at me, like I wasn't just some kid who dated her daughter. My eyes caught on the details I shouldn't notice. The small freckle just under her jawline, the way her nail polish was chipped at the edges, the faint scent of her perfume carried by the warm air from the kitchen. "This is dangerous," I muttered, more to myself than to her. She leaned forward just slightly. "Only if you think it is." The words hit harder than they should have. I felt my pulse quicken. I wanted to tell her she was right, or maybe that she was wrong. I wasn't sure which, but the truth sat somewhere between the two, pulling me in closer. She reached across the counter then, her fingers resting lightly on my forearm. Just a touch, enough to stop my thoughts mid-step. "You don't have to leave yet," she said, her voice low now. "Unless you want to." I didn't answer. I just let the warmth from her hand sink into my skin, knowing that staying would mean crossing a line I could never uncross. And yet, I didn't move. Her hand was still on my arm when the sound broke through. A faint vibration from the counter. Her phone, screen lighting up with a name I recognized. Her daughter's. She glanced at it, then at me. For a second, I thought she might answer. Instead, she pressed the side button, sending the call away. "You didn't," I started. "It can wait," she said quickly, withdrawing her hand. The space between us felt louder without her touch. I wrapped my fingers around my mug again, trying to focus on the coffee, on anything that wasn't the way she just dismissed her own daughter's call to keep talking to me. "You don't have to do that," I said. Her gaze was steady, but softer now. Maybe I wanted to. The air in the room tightened. I should have changed the subject, made a joke, stood up, anything. But instead I found myself studying her face again, noticing how her lipstick had faded just enough to make her look less composed. She leaned back slightly, exhaling like she'd been holding something in. "You know, when you two were together, I always thought you were different, quieter. You notice things most people don't." I felt heat creep up my neck. "What makes you say that? You just looked at me like I was here, not just part of the background." The words hit harder than they should have. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came. Instead, she reached for the sugar jar. Our hands brushed again. Not the clumsy kind of touch you apologize for, but the kind you both notice and pretend you don't. I pulled my hand back, forcing a laugh. "You're making this harder than it should be." Her smile was slow. "And yet you're still here." Before I could reply, there was a sudden knock at the front door. Sharp, unexpected. She froze. I watched her glance toward it, then back to me. "Don't move," she whispered, almost like it was instinct. I stayed in my seat as she went to the door, peeking through the curtain. "Just the neighbor," she called back after a moment, her voice a little too casual. She cracked the door open, exchanged a few polite words, then shut it quickly. When she returned, she leaned against the counter across from me, arms folded, like nothing had happened. But her eyes told a different story. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. Then, after a beat, "It's just, when you knocked earlier, I didn't think you'd actually come inside." Her gaze locked with mine then, holding it longer than before. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, the rain soft against the windows. She stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her. "You should probably go," she murmured. But her body didn't move back, and mine didn't either. I could feel the space between us narrowing, not just physically, but in all the ways we'd been pretending it didn't exist. She still hadn't moved back. Neither had I. The kitchen felt smaller than it had 5 minutes ago. "This is—" I started, then stopped. Her head tilted slightly. "Dangerous." I nodded. She gave a small, humorless laugh. "You think I don't know that?" For a moment, the only sound was the rain, steady and unbothered, like it had no idea what was happening inside. I tried to look away, but my eyes came back to hers. "Why did you text me that?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because I was thinking about you." The way she said it, not playful, not teasing, made my pulse hit my throat. You shouldn't have. Maybe not. She exhaled slowly, like the truth was heavier than she expected. But I did. And when you didn't answer right away, I thought, maybe I'd ruined it. Ruined what? I asked, my voice lower than before. This, she said, motioning between us. Whatever this is. I swallowed hard. We're not supposed to have a this. Her eyes searched mine, and for the first time, there was no smile, no careful mask. And yet here you are. I wanted to tell her she was crossing a line, that this was a mistake. Instead, I said, you make it hard to leave. Her hand tightened around the edge of the counter. You make it hard to be careful. The honesty between us was sharp now, almost too much to hold. I wanted to step back, but the pull was stronger than my sense. I took half a step closer, close enough that the faint scent of her perfume felt like it was wrapping around me. If I stay, I said, I don't know where this ends. She didn't look away. Maybe I don't want to know. Something in me broke then, not into action but into something worse, the point where imagining it felt just as dangerous as doing it. I reached up without thinking, brushing a stray hair from her face. My fingers lingered just a second too long against her cheek. She didn't move. The silence between us was heavy now, charged. Every second felt like the last before something irreversible. Then, her voice, quiet, steady. Tell me you haven't thought about it. I opened my mouth, but the truth pressed against my teeth and wouldn't stay down. She waited. I didn't answer. We just stood there, the rain outside blurring the rest of the world. Both of us holding a question neither of us was ready to answer out loud. Her question, tell me you haven't thought about it, was still hanging in the air when she stepped back, just enough to break the magnetic pull between us. I thought it was retreat. But then she said, there's something you should know. The shift in her tone cut straight through the haze. She set her mug down, wrapping her arms around herself like she needed the weight. You think this started with that text? It didn't. I frowned. What do you mean? Her eyes searched mine, and I could see the hesitation there, like she was deciding whether the truth would ruin everything. The day you came to help her move out, she said quietly. You stayed behind to fix that cabinet hinge in the kitchen. I remembered. She'd been making tea, humming to herself. I'd been pretending not to watch her out of the corner of my eye. You left your jacket, she continued. I found it later. And in the pocket. She hesitated again. I found the letter. I froze. It wasn't a letter I'd meant for anyone to read. Just a folded sheet of notebook paper, scrawled with the things I couldn't say to her daughter. Things about feeling unseen, unimportant, and the part about someone else catching my attention when I shouldn't let them. You read it, I said, my voice tight. She nodded. I shouldn't have, but I did. And I knew it was about me. The room felt smaller now, but in a different way, like all the air had been pulled out. So when you texted me, I started. I'd been thinking about it for months, she finished. About you. I didn't know whether to be angry she'd read it or relieved she'd finally said this out loud. My thoughts tripped over each other, but my chest felt light and heavy at the same time. Before I could respond, the sound of another vibration rattled the counter. My phone this time. I glanced at the screen. My ex's name. Her eyes followed mine. You should answer, she said, her voice unreadable. I didn't. I turned the phone face down. You're not going to? She asked. No, that answer seemed to land harder than anything else I'd said all night. She stepped toward me again, slower this time, like she was measuring each inch. You don't know everything either, I said, my voice lower now. She waited. That letter, it wasn't the first time I thought about you. The way she looked at me then, sharp, searching, made me think she was deciding something in real time. And whatever it was, I knew when she finally chose, everything would change for good. Her gaze didn't waver after my confession. She just stood there, close enough that I could see the faintest tremor in her hands. You don't have to say that, she said softly. I'm not saying it because I have to. The rain outside had softened to a mist, but inside, the tension felt louder than it ever had. Every word we'd avoided for months was pressing at the edges now, begging to be let out. She swallowed, her voice quieter. If we do this, there's no going back. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because going back wasn't an option anymore. We passed that point the second you sent me that text. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a frown, the expression of someone who wants something but still feels the weight of it. I'm not proud of how I've been thinking about you, she admitted, but I can't stop. Hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way that no look, no brush of the hand ever had. I tried, I said. I told myself it was just timing, that I was lonely, that I just wanted someone to notice me. And? She asked. And it's you. It's always been you. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for months. You have no idea how dangerous that is for both of us. I think I do. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, like the space between us was holding everything we hadn't dared to say until now. I stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her, see the faint freckle near her collarbone I'd noticed before. Her hand came up, resting lightly on my chest. She didn't pull me in. She didn't have to. We can't undo this, she whispered. I don't want to. Her eyes searched mine for a long second, as if she needed to be sure I meant it. Then her fingers curled against my shirt, not to pull me closer, but to hold me there. I'm scared of what happens next, she admitted. I leaned in just enough for my forehead to brush hers. So am I. We stayed like that, neither moving further, neither pulling away, the decision already made, even if we hadn't crossed the last inch. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steady. Then stay. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't even an invitation. It was a statement, the kind you only make when you've already chosen. And in that moment I realized so had I. I stayed. I don't remember making the decision. There wasn't a single moment where I thought, yes, this is it. It was more like the choice had been sitting there all along, waiting for us to finally admit it. She didn't rush toward me. She didn't have to. We just stood there in that quiet kitchen, the rain tapering off outside, the smell of coffee still hanging in the air. I thought about all the reasons I shouldn't, she said eventually, her voice low. They're still there. They always will be. I know. Her eyes softened in that way that made it impossible to look anywhere else. But I've also thought about how it feels when you look at me like that. Like I'm still someone worth looking at. That hit me harder than I expected. Maybe because I understood it. You are, I said, no hesitation. She smiled. Not the polite one she gave neighbors or the guarded one she'd worn earlier. This was different, unshaped, real. I thought about the text that started all this, about the letter she'd found months ago, about the careful way we'd circled each other without admitting it. Every step had been its own little line, and somewhere along the way we'd stopped worrying about crossing them. What happens now? I asked. Her answer came without pause. We figure it out. Quietly, carefully. But we don't pretend anymore. There was no grand declaration. No perfect kiss under the rain. Just two people standing in a kitchen, both knowing that the weight of what we just decided would follow us everywhere, and not caring enough to walk away from it. I helped her clean the mugs, the kind of small, ordinary thing that felt strange after everything we just admitted. But maybe that's what made it work. The world hadn't stopped. The floor was still warm under my socks. The fridge still hummed. As I left later, the air outside smelled like wet pavement, the streetlights casting halos on the sidewalk. She stood in the doorway, her sweater pulled around her, watching me the way she probably shouldn't. I turned back before getting on my bike. You'll text me? Her answer was almost a whisper, but I caught it. You already know I will. Riding away, I realized we hadn't started something tonight. We'd just finally stopped running from it. And whatever came next, we'd face it the same way we'd stood in that kitchen. Close enough to feel the heat, far enough to remember the danger, but unwilling to step back.